she would write one maybe.
Well, cool. We're a couple minutes past. There's folks can join in. Why don't we get started? So thank you everybody for joining us today for a live podcast of MiXR Studios. I'm excited to be joined by Professor Michael Nebeling. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, Jeremy. How's it going, my friend?
It's good. It's good. I am looking forward to our conversation today to talk about your XR for Everybody MOOC. Just share some of your goals with that, and maybe your process behind it, why you thought this was important, and then maybe spend some time talking about your role as the XR Innovator in Residence this first year with the XR Initiative. We just celebrated our first year, and maybe talk about some of the highlights there. And then we'll open it up to the audience for Q&A. And if folks want to put questions in the chat or the Q&A, we'll address those after we're done. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Great. Well, let's talk about the MOOC was in process before I started, before the XR initiative. I think you had just kind of signed off, or were in the process of kicking that off. How did this come about? I know there was a teach out a couple of years ago, and I know this is your area of expertise, and let's love to learn a little bit more about that.
Okay, so the first thing I'll say is so quite a few people involved, and the support from academic innovation has been instrumental. And I actually blame mostly James Devaney from taking me out to a nice coffee and saying, Michael, you know what, would be good to do this MOOC specialization. I think this could be, he was very encouraging. So yeah, so before that, when I joined Michigan in 2016, young Michael, what do I do as a professor? Given all that money, let's buy some things. So we started out in the AR/VR space. I was really fascinated about these as interactive technologies, and I had to learn a lot of this stuff myself. I think that was an important first thing to realize. I've worked with a lot of these technologies, like the Kinect, for example, which can see your body and track your skeleton and gesture interactions. I've done voice-based interaction before, didn't find it so interesting from an interaction design perspective. And so the AI technologies were really appealing to me, and they were just like they've been around for many years. There are a lot of people in the research space that would normally discourage you. Like, why would you start in that space? We've been doing research for 30 years. Who are you? And so, yeah, so there were some interesting obstacles, I think, along the way. I'm not like not one of those gods, VR or AR gods, but we've been, like, with my little team, we've been quite successful, I think, in the research space. I'm proud of what we have accomplished. We definitely had challenges there. And this realization that, learning this stuff myself, though I think I'm not like stupid or anything, so I should really felt, hey, there should be an approach to this that is not the computer graphics route. Like, that doesn't require that you know all the 3D programming and that you're like super familiar with Unity.
Sure.
And I was actually afraid of Unity for a long time. My background was in web and mobile, so how do I translate those skills? So I started to create 2 courses. I was teaching interaction design for a few years at Michigan, and everybody was doing mobile apps, so I was getting a little bored and saw opportunity to really bring in AR VR. So I started that a little bit in my existing interaction design courses, but then I felt like I need to provide more training and more context. And so I had a lot of support from the deans to create my own courses. I think it's a really fortunate thing to be able to teach not one of these, you have to teach courses, foundational ones, but to create your own ones. So yeah. School of Information was really supportive. Tom Finholt and Beth Yakel have been like pushing me also, like, in a positive way. Anyway, so we have these 2 courses now. So like, I'm jumping forward. We have like 2 residential courses. One is interaction design for AR VR, teaching right now 2 sections. We are about 80 students, really exciting.
Is this undergrad, grad?
What's all masters?
All master students, okay.
They're very masters. There are might be some undergrads. I usually am inclusive, but we also have like a capacity limit and the COVID-19 challenges. So anyway, lots of things going on there. Anyway, residential courses. We have a more technical one in the winter. So in January, starting in January, I'm a little scared of that one. It really requires access to devices and Now we are a little limited there. And so the online course was like, okay, we have to go online anyway. Like at the time, I didn't know that. It was mostly like James, academic innovation. Barry Fishman was somebody I've consulted with a little bit. He told me about the culture of academic innovation, how cool you guys are. Then you came on board. So I was like, okay, cool. All the stars are like in the right position. Let's do this MOOC.
Sure.
And so, yeah, we worked together on this MOOC for a year, or 3 MOOCs. I mean, I think it would be good to know a little bit about the complexity. I can go into detail there. I want you to structure the discussion, but like quite a complex thing to actually create these 3 MOOCs. There's an interesting interplay between what happens in the residential course and in the online course. And the vision I have for that I haven't really fully implemented yet. Can talk about that as well.
And so who's the intended audience in your mind? Who, you know, obviously you're teaching courses for master's students at the University of Michigan on campus. When you thought about the MOOC, like who did you want to address, or you know, what problem are you trying to address in that space?
Yeah. So the teach out that you had mentioned, which I haven't really picked up on yet. So that was bringing this understanding of, hey, there are these XR technologies. They're coming into our everyday lives. We need to think about the issues. So it was really raising awareness, understanding what AR, what VR is, a very broad audience. So then we got a little bit of feedback. It's a nice introduction to AR, VR, but how do you design for it? How do you develop with these technologies? So that was missing from the teach out. Gotcha. And I did this in my residential courses. So I think of the specialization that we have now is like one course is focused on this broad understanding, both conceptually and technically. And that is targeted to like everybody, even those that would never want to actually be a designer or a developer, but who might be users, whether they know it or not, right? Because you could be a passers-by, like you could just walk through an AR experience and being recorded by another device and being afraid of what that technology. But if you know, hey, that doesn't know anything at this stage, it's just much more comfortable how you interact with these technologies. And the other 2 courses are really going deep in design and development, and they are targeted towards people who want to learn more about, potentially transfer some existing skills, but maybe also the first time they're doing interaction design. So it's like, I would say the courses are not super advanced, but like they're really providing I hope and I wish a good foundation.
Great. And you're coming at it from a different angle of user experience design or interaction design versus what's I've seen traditionally is coming from the video game design development space. Was that on purpose, or that's just the space you come from, and so that wasn't even a consideration to come from the game dev side?
So I come at it as a human-computer interaction researcher, and interaction design is a course I've been teaching years, and we're just teaching these very traditional now web and mobile. They're actually traditional now. They were exciting at the time, like thinking about touch and gesture. Woo, exciting. That was cool at the time, but I think the next wave is AR, VR into these technologies. And so right now, I think I have these specialized courses, right? There's people still think of these technologies as being exotic. Like AR, VR, I've never seen that. But I think what is happening in a few years from now, a lot of what we now have in these MOOC courses and what I teach residentially, that's how user experience design and interaction design will be transformed over the next few years. It's already happening. Web design, you don't think about desktop anymore. You think about desktop, mobile, smartwatch, maybe AR, VR, and that realization, I think. So it's interesting to think about how that MOOC itself will evolve over the thinking around it will evolve over the next few years.
Sure, and this will be open to anyone, right? Anybody in the world could sign up.
Yeah, so my wish is, so the way we have designed it, when I say accessible, so I have to be careful. So accessibility in this space is really a super big issue. So I say the course is accessible to a lot of different people. It's a series of 3 courses. One is really providing the foundation. So what if you're taking a course in a residential program, that course would have 0 prerequisites, no assumptions whatsoever. Everybody can take it. Everybody should benefit. Everybody will grow throughout this course. So you know more when you come out than potentially, at least in this space, than when you come in. the design one in the middle is still similar. No prerequisites. Like my residential course that I'm teaching, no prerequisites. You just come in.
Okay.
And probably I throw around some interaction design terms like domain, context, constraints, affordances, that sometimes students remind me that we haven't heard of those yet. And yeah, so yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let me
Okay.
step back and explain it. And then the one where you really play with these technologies, and I'm sure a lot of our attendees here would agree with it, there is still a very high barrier to working with these technologies directly.
Mm-hmm.
And that last course is trying to break that barrier. Like you will probably not be like, you will be in a position where you can implement your app ideas, prototype them, but working directly with the technologies, not being limited to some prototyping tool, but working directly with Unity or A-Frame. And that is a great accomplishment, but that is a higher barrier to entry already, but we're breaking that.
Nice.
And then I think there is a ceiling to the course, which is like, if your dream is to work on the Microsoft HoloLens team or the Facebook Reality Labs, thinking about Oculus and what the concerns that industry have at the moment are, obviously content is one thing, which I think we are empowering more people to participate in design.
Yep.
But the issues that a lot of industry works on are a much lower level. Hand tracking, how do we detect objects? How do you interact with the environment? How do we make it safe? So I think that would be the next step after the MOOCs. That's a little out of scope. I have a lecture on advanced techniques. We'll talk procedure generation, 3D reconstruction, fancy things, but not a big topic.
And those aren't part of the honors track, correct? What is the honors track?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So we designed the courses to be, you can learn about XR while you're exercising or like dreaming about something else, just listening, watching some cool demos, or you can get your hands dirty. And the honors track is an experiment in some sense to get this to work with a lot of different devices. It's one of the main challenges we had. We took the lowest common denominator. Like for example, I feature the HoloLens 2. But my course is not a HoloLens 2 course, right? Maybe Microsoft will have one focused on HoloLens 2.
Sure.
And so
$100 device.
That equity barrier as well. So so I'm actually sure. So I don't exactly know how Coursera works and how paying or whatever for that works, but all the content is available for free. And then if you want to get a certificate out of this, there might be some cost involved, but you can still access all the content. And the honors track is designed for people who really want to spend some time with these technologies, who want to add a project to their portfolio, who want to be critiqued by other learners. There's a peer review component.
Nice.
And basically over the course, the second and the third course have this project-oriented honors track. You actually develop 2 what I think will be significant portfolio pieces. I really hope there will be online learners who's like, hey, Michael, I did this in your course. What do you think? And I'll be blown away, I'm sure. And the first course also has an honors track, but that one is, hey, let's discuss these issues of accessibility, of equity, of social, and privacy and security concerns, ethical concerns,
right?
Which, by the way, are also in each of. I won't stop talking because I'm so excited.
That's fine. That's why you're here.
These concerns are also in each of the MOOCs. But when you actually play around with these technologies, like you're really deep down implementing this app,
right?
It's like there's this library that you can just use, and it does the job for you. That hosts all the data with this evil provider. Then you're thinking you have to make some really interesting decisions there, and then you sometimes sacrifice maybe you make but it gives you the features. That's what you need.
Right.
And you trade privacy, security, and some other ethical concern.
Yes,
it's not good.
Nothing is free. Nothing is really free. What in terms of equity, you started to mention designing for the lowest common denominator. So obviously not the HoloLens, probably not even a Quest or something like this.
Looks fancy.
It's in reach, right? It's $300. It's a little more in reach than 3,500. But
I'm
how
not
do you come across?
sure.
Yeah.
I'm
How
not
did you
sure
come?
whether most students would agree that a $400 device is in reach.
Mm-hmm.
I was very disappointed when, one sec, when this is a message to you guys out there, Google, right? So when this is Daydream, it's a nice cardboard. Like it gives you a little bit of a controller here, 3 degrees of freedom controller, one hand only, but still fun. That's still cool. But it requires a phone to be put inside for this to work. Hey, I can buy this for like $40. That's a difference. I can do a lot. I can reuse my phone. Like I feel like from an equity standpoint, this was really, really cool. Why are we crushing those products? So now I'm in a scenario where my lowest common denominator approach is like, let's get cardboard.
Okay.
And right
And
now we're
what's
distributing
cardboard for people that don't
cardboard.
know? Yeah.
Cardboard is a cheaper version of this, like $7, and it's literally cardboard. And I don't actually have one here right now. It's somewhere. I don't know. It would have to be. Your phone goes inside, and you hold it in front of your head, and that gives you a kind of a virtual reality experience. And it's super cheap. Do you have one around?
I might have a Nintendo. I have a Nintendo Switch one.
Okay.
So putting a Switch on your head is even more uncomfortable because it's very top
Super
heavy.
cool. The one that I like is $15.
Yep.
So I'm not sure whether we're doing product advertisements, but anyway, it says I am cardboard. Oops, I don't know which way to hold it. Anyway.
You had it right.
And so then you take it out and it becomes your goggles, and the phone goes inside here and then gives you a little bit of VR. But even a $15, like when you teach students at Michigan or anywhere else in the world, there's already a lot of cost involved in just getting into these programs. Financial burden is very high already. And so who am I to say, hey, if you want to take my course, you just buy a $400 headset, you'll be fine.
Right.
Difficult, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see prices come down as more people get into the space, but even at the most recent Quest, right, I would say they're $299, but they're subsidizing the price, I would say, for access to the data, and the data that you would generate on that.
The issue that we have is scale. Like we want to teach this to a lot of people, potentially thousands of learners online from all kinds of backgrounds all over the world. We have all kinds of issues already, connectivity wise, bandwidth wise. There might be severe implications. I'm always concerned when people start recording, like working on an assignment, an AR assignment, and you see cats and dogs walking. That's cute, but like, I don't know. I'm going somewhere else right now. But let me come back to the equity thing. It's an unsolved issue. I don't think that. I mean, it's nice that the Quest is there, a $299 model. It's still not. It's not good enough for most learners in terms of affordability. I think we need to be. I mean, there's a trend at least, so maybe it will be in everybody's pocket in 2 to 5 years from now, maybe. I also like this direction of actually working around the smartphone. I really like that we have this tool. We can turn it into a VR thing. We can turn it into an AR thing. It can be a head-worn AR with different extensions to it. I was betting on it. I wrote 2 unsuccessful NSF proposals because my reviewers were like, do you think this is really the way to go? And I feel like, yes, it should be, but it's not now. I can see that now Google and others have killed that idea of cardboard and Daydream and Oculus Go.
And what outside of financials or revenue generation, were there technical limitations with some of what I heard was the refresh rate or the mobile phone processor couldn't necessarily keep up and process the experiences. I mean, is that true from your perspective or what you've done?
Well, I don't know how many times you've overheated your phone, but I can tell you that it's a very interesting process when a phone is inside one of these headsets and the air is not really good, and you're running this at 60 frames per second or 90, which is kind of like, or 80, I think. I'm not sure what they're rendering it. you can see that when it enters the VR, the display starts to look different. Not just the rendering, but also like the refresh rate. And so they're basically squeezing the most performance that you can get out of these phones. They get very hot.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also throttle. So that means the performance goes down. And so I can see that that is an inherent limitation. So I think the industry wanted to push forward these, they have now these technologies where they can build the cameras inside a headset. The headset is standalone. They can put an entire computer on your head now. It's a little heavy still. What do you think?
This, right?
Still a little heavy.
I mean, they're better when you have a counterbalance in the back. I find that's more comfortable for longer term use, right? After 20 minutes, I start to get neck fatigue.
Yeah, but how long term is actually what we're doing long term? Like, who's really working in virtual reality? I think I always think of my PhD and master students as those that spend probably the most time, except for maybe some hardcore gamers, in AR VR technologies. And yeah, it's not comfortable.
Well, cool. So we have the MOOC is about to launch. We're targeting in early November to launch the MOOC on the Coursera platform. What's the process been like? How did you go? I mean, it was changing very rapidly through this whole production. We threw COVID in there. You had to start filming remotely from your house. Like, of all the possible scenarios, I think it probably encapsulated just what it's like to work in this space of things changing and you having to adapt and be, agile, resilient. Can you talk about that? And
so I think we were very resilient. My honest opinion is that it felt a little bit like a PhD thesis. It's like one of those things. Although I think my PhD thesis was my primary thing. I had this thing. The XR MOOC was one of many things I was working on in parallel. I was trying to grow a lab. I was trying to manage students' health, mental health. There's a lot of things going on. I think we had one or two meetings where my production lead, Annie, was probably a little concerned about me because I looked a little sad. So there were some tough times. Sure. I'm just like completely honest. But I feel like I'm overall very, very proud when I look at the materials that we have produced. And I'm not looking at them, but he had to do it. You had to do it by himself. So that's why it's like that. No, I'm actually still like, it's so cool. There's a HoloLens too. And it's like working with 3 GoPros and like 2 GoPros, I was exaggerating. So 2 GoPros and have a few camera angles and we're mixing in the 360 footage. So we're using the technologies to communicate the technologies. It's like one of the, I think, when I look at a lot of the space in terms of like how these MOOCs are being done, we're not the first to do we're probably the first to really cover augmented reality in depth. There's a few MOOCs out there in the space, actually some quite established ones that are focused on virtual reality.
Yep.
And some of them come from the vendors directly, and some of them come from really respectable teachers and universities. So really good stuff. So how do we differ with our MOOC? Well, we don't do a lot of post-production. We actually do live demos, live production. We use the technologies to support the teaching. In some of the lectures, you see me directly in a VR headset, and I'm teaching about VR inside a VR headset. That was really fun and really exciting, and that was not that our production team went crazy editing all the stuff in post.
Sure.
No, this is virtual production and live production, and I'm very proud of that. I think I'm very proud of the stuff that we accomplished. I also like that I was given so much freedom. There's a lot of video sequences. I've been a hobby video editing person for like many years. I used to do one around the holidays to show my mom what my year has been like. And when I was a video blog, I still have been to use the worst possible video editor and then try to do something cool with it.
See what you can do with it. Nice.
And now I've learned some of the more advanced video editing tools. I'm not as good as our production team, but I'm proud of some of the things we produced at all. So.
Well, you had to adjust because normally you would have a lot more support from the media design team and the folks at Academic Innovation, but with having to stay distant, had to provide remote support for you took on a little bit more of that than maybe
Yeah,
other.
it was
courses
funny
do.
how when we were talking about that support and how do we set this up here in this room, it's actually how do you make it work with me there, and how's anybody else going to live in this house while I'm like filming? It was funny how we were so concerned about getting the lectures right, like putting a camera and maybe a teleprompter. You know, that was not the challenge. The challenge was how do you record in an interesting, hands-on, the learner is with me way. It's like I'm trying it, like, hey, Jeremy, come on over here. Let's drive in this car in virtual reality. So I put you in a 360. And I think that's what I like so much about how we mix these different things together. Sometimes I must say, some of my students, like I have this style, where I like to mix different angles to give people a lot of, like, this is what's going on in the context. This is where I am right now. And then I like to switch between these different perspectives.
Yeah.
Some of the feedback, so some of my students are right now watching some of the videos that we produced for the MOOC in my residential course, and the feedback has been very encouraging. And I mixed it so that they can also feel free to complain about it. So I gave them other things to watch as well. So they're not like just like, Michael wants us to say good things. No, I think the feedback is encouraging there. One point though is that maybe I'm switching perspectives a little too often.
Oh, too much. Quick cuts. Well, do you have any to show us today? Or have you put together anything that a little preview?
I show you. Thanks for asking. No, so we already covered a little bit of the. I just like do a two-minute rundown.
Yeah.
How I think about it. So, and I'm not even sure whether this is full screen. So it's 3 courses. The foundational one I talked about. It's really about the knowing, the shaping, and then a lot of the doing, both design and development. So we talked about that, right? And then I have like some for each of the 3 courses. So I took some representative videos from each of the courses that I really enjoyed. And this one on the intro, like I'll show you one example. So when we teach about XR, I think even these small things like bringing in like a headset to show the learners, hey, we don't show third-party content. Like a lot of the MOOCs show like, okay, let's show this Google advertisement video about Tilt Brush.
Sure.
And it's so cool. No, I personally think it makes a difference if I put those things on my head. And I look like an idiot here, but that's part of the, I have to cut this out, sorry. But
nobody looks great with a VR headset on.
Yes, so get used to it. And this was just, but look at this. This is a different way of teaching. Now I'm like inside virtual reality, and I'm teaching it. We're composing. This is a live composition. I see actually, I see the real world through my headset. We have like, I have a reference point, and then I'm sketching just in 3D. And I'm just doing something very basic here, just illustrating the concepts along the virtual reality continuum that the learners will learn about. But we have like 2 versions of those lectures, and I'm interested. So the traditional one I just showed you, and then this immersive one. And I'm really interested to hear. It's not really a research project at this stage, but I'm just like curious for the feedback from the learners. Hey, this is cool, but hey, this really supported my learning.
Right.
Curious about that. So, yeah.
Well, that's one of the challenges about, somebody watching somebody else in VR. Unless you're on a PC-based headset with a monitor next to it, you can't really see what they're seeing, right? They have to communicate with you, or you have to just kind of guess if you've done that title before, where they. Right? So I like the way you.
I still remember you showing me recently. It was very cute when you showed me let's say a remote collaboration AR experience.
Yeah.
I didn't even try it. I just teased you, and you were like,
"That sounds about right."
Thanks, man. I wanted you to see this, and you're not even seriously. The thing is, everything kind of still looks the same when you've seen it. The most important thing is to see it once for yourself.
Right.
And I think the primary issue right now that I see with my students in the residential course, and I think this will happen to our online learners in the MOOC course as well. You see Michael with all these technologies, and it's cool, but they're still very expensive. So you're going for cardboard. Maybe you're getting the plastic version. Maybe you're getting an actual cardboard. And you're starting to see a little bit. But it's very different from the other things you see in the movies, Avengers, and or
Sure.
like even in some of the most advanced. And so I think my students in the design-oriented course, they actually feel like they're designing in the blind. They don't have exactly the access to these technologies. So they're learning, there's multiple things going on. They want to learn about how to design for these technologies. They don't have access to these technologies. I show them lots of video examples.
Yeah.
So like learning by looking at videos, but not really experiencing it for themselves. And that is a very difficult position to be in as a designer.
Yeah, and as someone, if you've never tried it, like, how do you know what the interactions are? What does it feel like? That's one of the things at the XR initiative we've pivoted over the summer and now making more devices available. So we're piloting. We purchased 25 Quests to begin piloting checkout for students and faculty this fall. So we're going to test from Shapiro, checking out for a couple of the projects we're working on, a couple of the courses, just so we can get the process down and the cleaning and we bought a clean box so we can, kill all the virus and wipe it down and just make sure it's safe, and then begin to iterate on how do we get more of these devices to students. So I think by next semester we should have that.
But even then, we've talked to instructors. It's part of the challenge is to get these devices to the students. But even pre-COVID, a lot of the instructors we just interviewed recently some of our XR initiative involved XR instructors, people that have used XR in instruction at Michigan. And but they kind of like uniformly told us that it's still a new technology to most students. So having access to it is one, but you're not like immediately a digital native to that, or immersive native. I'm not sure what you call this in the future.
I
but
like that.
And so the learning curve is pretty high. So then how do you guide people when you're not with them in the room? I mean, most people will put on the headset the right way, okay?
Sure.
And that's not the issue. But then like the learning curve is still a little high. And so especially when the instructor has a clear learning goal in mind, but you're spending like 20 minutes like breaking through to the students, first of all, getting them to use it in the way you want it, and not them going like crazy, hey, I can do all these things, and being distracted. It's going to be, distribution is one issue, and you're addressing that. But then you're with this challenge where you then want to coordinate remotely. And it's kind of like this, when researchers talk about controlled experiments in a lab, where they can control everything, including your tasks and your focus, as opposed to like remote usability studies, where like usually the cat jumps into the scene and types on the keyboard. Yeah, so it's but I don't want to take anything away from you. I think the effort around the distribution is amazing.
Well, no, I mean, those are real challenges. I mean, we talked with Professor Hera Kim Berman, and she had secured 110 Oculus Go headsets for her dental students, and they were similar challenges, right? It's just it's not a common type of device. It still needs to be charged. It has to have updates run. You install apps. While that framework is similar to a mobile phone, you're on your phone every day, all day, right? Like, so it's just
and I don't know what my students think of me, but it's not like I walk around with these headsets all the time. They're like toys. They're like interesting for a day, really cool, fancy, and then the next day you're hoping for a new toy. And I don't know, I've always I was a late adopter. I think I got my first touch device in 2011 when the iPhone was there in 2007. So I was like, I'm an interaction design researcher, always working with the latest technology. So you could say the same with AR VR now.
Sure.
My HoloLens we got it in 17 actually, 17, and actually came out in 15. But it's a big financial commitment. Anyway, so the point is that I think even though you have 130 Oculus Go's, they're only good for one thing, and then they're just lying around.
Right.
Unless we figure out a network between classes so that it could be a shared infrastructure, so that several teachers who embrace these technologies, several instructors, think of ways of, there's a little bit of these technologies, there are a lot of these technologies on campus, but they're like in different camps. And I think and then they're just stuck. Like I'm guilty. I have like 7 HoloLens in my lab. They're just on a shelf. Sorry. Nobody needs them right now. That's not true. I gave them to some students, but we need to figure out a way to build on a more common platform. But it's very risky because they're evolving all the time. So it's anyway, I like the effort that
I just ordered these Quest 1, and in the midst of it, the Quest 2 came out, and now I'm having inventory problems because people are taking them off the shelf. I mean, there's a cleaning protocol process there that needs to be addressed just in general, but obviously now for COVID. There's a visualization studio in the Duderstadt Center, like that had been high utilization, right, over the not last semester, but prior to that, and was beginning to gain traction. You taught a few courses in there, right?
Yeah, it's been a great resource for my students, and it's become more and more difficult. It's like a computing resource that we're like on a schedule.
Right.
You can, and it's primarily a student resource, so it's not designed for instructors to go in there and teach courses in there. And I like that setup. I really respect that. I think it's good. But when you think about it, I walked into this space a few times pre-COVID. It's not like everybody is doing AR, VR, 3D in there. There's games, there's Office documents. You really don't need an i7 with 32 gigs of RAM.
But you had that 37-inch screen. That's really nice.
I get it. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of, the platforms. I mean, how do you think about AR versus VR in terms of the trajectory of where they'll go from an educational standpoint?
Education. Okay, that's a good thing. So I'll throw in some ideas here. One thing that I'm exploring with my current PhD student Sridhar Rajaram is the role of paper and how paper can be combined with AR, and how like we often use paper as a marker for marker-based AR, and we use tools like Vuforia. Shout out to Jake, and that's cool. But nobody really designs around paper. Paper is just the launching the AR experience. They're not really making use of paper in interesting, useful ways. So we were exploring that. So I'm really excited about that. So I think AR in the classroom is very cool because I can see my peers. I'm not in this headset.
Right.
I can see everything around me. It's also good for the instructor because, like, you don't want to be in there. What are these students doing?
Yeah, unless you meet them in a social VR setting,
okay,
right? Like,
maybe a different story. Yeah. So I'm very excited about AR in the classroom, in a co-located classroom. I'm very excited about VR in a remote setting.
Yep.
And I'm also excited about collaborative AR experiences remote. And I'm also interested in I've always been interested in creating experiences where AR, VR, 3D, I don't care. You can collaborate and you can participate. And I think that is actually the trend. Yep. So the trend is not like, oh, VR will win or AR will win.
Sure.
The trend is we need to build ecosystems that build around these AR, VR technologies. We need to get away from these approaches where we want to create these islands of everything is like in my headset.
Yep. And
then the other thing is your phone, but they don't really work together.
Yeah.
And I believe strongly that there will always be tasks in the future where VR is the right approach. Yep. And there will always be tasks in the future where AR is the right approach. And I think the industry thinks about it. VR is relatively mature. You can still do more. AR is still pretty expensive, still experimental.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I would side with those that see more potential overall with AR. I think overall it might be more applicable in everyday life. But I think VR is super powerful for training and simulations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't give you a super clear answer. That's not one.
No, I mean, that's great. I mean, that's one of the things we're exploring with the initiative as well, is where best can these technologies be deployed and how they can enhance the student learning experience and improve the process, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's the number one learning goal I have for my MOOC and for us in the initiative is to get a good sense of where are these technologies good, what are the lessons we can learn from this project. I like the year one initiative a lot. Like you're funding 6 to 8 projects, depends on how you think about it. Research projects, 6 of them are at least carried out by your team, as far as I understand. The effort is really great. You have hired nice designers and developers. I was a little bit part of the recruitment.
Yeah, you were. Thank you very much.
Talal was helping us as well. I think you're putting Shalunda. I think great people you're adding to your team. It's really been a joy watching how you've been growing this. I'm in no way your peer, but from an outsider perspective, I think there's a lot of things I can learn from you. How you grow your team, how you build something inclusive, how you're bridging. So the AR/VR space is a very interesting space to work in, because everybody will tell you that they have been longer in this space than you have.
True.
It's like, hey, okay, I've been doing AR/VR when you were a baby, man. So, and that's not helpful, because we talked about this thing earlier and I didn't finish my thought. Sometimes it's very useful to have people that haven't been exposed too much to this technology, because they don't think within the constraints. They would not just dismiss this idea because, no, I can't do this with HoloLens. But what if you could?
Right.
Because I didn't know that you couldn't do it. I thought it would be a good idea. And that is so powerful. I think, anyway, so the initiative is great. The research projects that you're setting up are all designed right now to bring AR/VR into the classroom and learn potentially. My perspective. You should share yours.
No, that's the charge.
Can we improve learning? Can we even ask the question? Because the big problem is actually just trying to transform it. Did we do a good job? And then can we transform learning? And how do we transform it? In a positive or in a negative way? And a lot of it is trade-offs. There's no people that always present studies to me that VR is much better than blah, or the other way around. We can't generalize.
Right. Compared to what?
So yeah, you will have 6 examples that you can learn from. 8, let's say 8.
Yep.
And I think the next year initiative would be interesting. I would like to hear, I'm not sure whether you've given it a thought because you're just wrapping up one, but do you have, am I allowed to ask you questions?
Yeah, that's two-way street.
Okay. How do you think about next year's primary goal for the initiative?
Yeah, I think this first year was really around building community and understanding capacity, and starting to build out some example projects and engage a wider team and build out the team. I think this next year is about expanding that capacity for content creation. So we did a call for proposals last year. We funded these 8 projects you mentioned. We are going to do another call. I'm hoping to launch next week, early October, but more focused around using commercially available platforms to generate content. And so while the experiences we've been doing now require, a more complex set of 3D modeling and game engines like Unity and Unreal and deep process, I want to explore some of these authoring platforms for 360 video or WebXR, WebGL, and see if we can begin to bring more people into the space to create that may not have to go deep down the development stack, right? And have deep C++ or C# programming and kind of these longer arc projects, because they're time intensive. You have to build everything out. Where can somebody walk? Where can't they walk? What can they interact with? Can they go through this wall? Can they go down into the nuclear reactor? What happens when they're down there? What do we present to them? And I think our team's been doing a great job. Eric and Moiso have really helped put process and structure in place, beginning to iterate, bringing Shalanda in to help us think about ways to assess or create the learning goals and objectives, working with the faculty to continue to ask them, but all right, now that the student knows this, what can they do with that? What does this help with? And why VR? And what are we going to do in this space? And it's really helped us kind of pivot on some of our projects to hopefully create a much more engaging experience for the students and the learners.
Yeah, and the engaging in this space is still a relatively low-hanging fruit. I think you can accomplish that most of the time.
Yeah.
From my perspective, it's also super interesting to see some of my students transition into your team over the summer, like Toshi,
Mm-hmm.
and now she comes back and she has worked with you on some of the projects, and now she's a graded student assistant in my course, and she's not only a very lovely person to work with, but she has also grown quite a bit just by working on a range of projects with you. I
That's
think this
great.
approach of going broad is
Mm-hmm.
very good. Like the 6 examples in different domains, the whole strategy of the initiative to bridge all these different schools. I still think it's really, I don't know, I want to say this unique thing because it's like similar to this, like, hey, who has been longer in this space? We are relatively new in this space,
Mm-hmm.
but I think Michigan is doing a really cool job on the education side. We have also been in touch with people who have been studying education in AR. Like I'm thinking of Yuyan here at Harvard,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Radu. I think like we're making the right connections. Shalunda
Yep.
brought in a little bit of her network.
Yep.
Strategy wise, it's just very fascinating how year one was like, I don't know, if you play a strategy game, so year one is where you build your little village. That's what you're
Sure.
doing.
Yep.
And so year two is you're going to attack.
Civilization? No.
I was thinking StarCraft, but okay.
Yeah.
I'm a
Risk.
little biased there. Risk, yes. And I mean attack in a good way because you're like challenging
Mm-hmm.
some of the others in the space. Maybe you can be a little bit more, we have more results to share and show.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
can be more active
Mm-hmm.
with our peers.
Right.
You've been doing a good job interacting with the peers. It's also a lot of work. Like, you know, I think of myself as somebody who's really excited about the space. I want to like do everything. And then you have
Right.
all these opportunities and you're asking me, hey, Michael, do you know this? Do you know this? Do you want to meet these people? Hey, they might have. It's been
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean,
overwhelming, and it's
I've
been very
talked
good to
to,
have you.
well, thank you. And likewise, working with you to vet some of these ideas I have and help us shape the direction. I mean, there are, dozens and dozens of vendors we've been talking with, looking at platforms, evaluating, trying to understand where they are making progress. From our perspective, like should we build? What should we partner out? Like trying to understand where those tension points are, and will give us the best arc of moving forward and making an impact here.
Which I think you are already.
Yeah, and it's great. And you started to mention students. We're hiring students now. We're going to expand our student. It was always part of the mission to establish our structure and then begin to scale out and bring students in.
Yeah, because you want to be a good mentor. Like there's a lot of students excited about this space.
Yep.
I have to say, increasing to students. Like initially you come here as a new professor and you're like, hope anybody's going to work with me. And then there's a point where you're like overwhelmed. And I made a lot of mistakes in terms of like how I approach mentoring and how many students I work with. And sometimes I've worked with too many because I can never say no to people.
Sure.
That's not good. That's I think that's why I'm so fascinated with how you have approached this whole come into this ecosystem where a lot of little islands are already we're doing AR VR.
Mm-hmm.
I see you as a unifier, and at the same time still giving the credit where it's due. Not everything is XR initiative branded. We're not claiming everything.
No.
We understand the role of the Digital Center. It's an amazing team over there. It's been supporting a lot of the work. We're looking for ways to collaborate, to kind of like help each other. I think this is actually really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can shine a spotlight or provide a megaphone to faculty or staff that have been in this space, right? And we can bring that into the light, and happy to do that. And like, we can't do everything. We don't want to do everything, but we want to build a broader community.
You shouldn't do everything.
No, to build a broader community. And we're looking to engage more students, so we'll be hiring more. We're going to be supporting a design challenge, an XR and Arts design challenge for diversity, equity, and inclusion for next winter semester. So folks that want to use arts and potentially XR to imagine an anti-racist world, that they could speculatively design what that would look like. They could potentially visualize that in AR, VR, and we would support maybe with providing some equipment or some consulting, access to software, things like that.
It's a very powerful space to work in. It's potentially re-victimizing, traumatizing. So I have a lot of students that come
Yeah.
come work with some of these really hard to process topics. I think it will put you in a lot of additional challenges, not just getting the AR VR right. You don't want to have a naive solution. I'm so frustrated with some of the things I see out there. It's like a playground. Everybody wants to play, and some people build really ugly sandcastles, and other people build really nice sandcastles, and then they want to own the sandbox, and they're pushing everybody else out, and it's an interesting space. Do you I feel like, do you want to go to some of the questions? I've seen some.
Yeah. You spurred one point here about where I want to see things go. I want to help either, participate in or help shape what an ethical framework look like around developing. There's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot that can be done. We talked about it last spring. Like, somebody built a VR experience to revisit her deceased daughter, 7-year-old daughter. I don't the moral police, but like, are there some guidelines around what could be done? I mean, there's a potential to, like you said, re-victimize or re-traumatize or induce trauma that never existed before, because these experiences are so realistic that their brain doesn't interpret them the same way as watching a video or a screen.
I've been coming into this space with a computer science background and pushing these technologies fascinated. And then I was shaped by the School of Information and the thinking there, and the high values of my colleagues that I'm trying to adopt as well around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're trying to do this at the University of Michigan. We're not always getting it right, but we can hopefully learn from also these negative examples that we sometimes set ourselves, and hopefully we can hold ourselves to higher standards. A couple of lectures were particularly difficult for me to teach in the MOOC and come up around ethics and design guidelines. It's really a wild west. I think it needs more people to think about this in the space. I do think that in particular, our School of Information students are so nicely equipped. We don't necessarily need more programmers in this space. We don't. No, we need more human-computer interaction. We need more user experience design. We need more people that think about the ethics. My students pointed out, so the one thing I did after the MOOC is a little bit of a celebration. I watched The Last Dance because I'm a basketball fan. I don't look like I'm a basketball player because I'm tiny, but no. So I watched The Last Dance, and then the students were like pointing out, "Hey, Michael, you've been watching the wrong thing. You should watch The Social Dilemma." And it's interesting because they seemed so shocked about it. So I've been watching half of it, and I'm like, nothing of what I see so far is surprising to me. Maybe it's the professorial things. Nothing shocks me, but I knew that that's what. Like, how can it be shocking? To me, it's shocking that my students think it's shocking. That is actually the problem, not that they put together a show where they bring these issues to visibility. No, what is actually shocking to me is that a lot of people don't think about these issues, and so I need to do a better job as an educator.
The awareness of what is actually happening with all of your data and your information. Sure. Yeah, and I don't claim that we're going to set the ethical standard or know it all, but like, be part of a larger group that's participating in that. And we were participated with a group out of Georgia Tech to help set some data privacy recommendations around XR for this XR safety initiative, and give feedback on that around, FERPA data and personally identifiable information and biometrics as they relate to student records, and what our responsibility is in that space.
It's interesting. So I went to this. I like the efforts that you're doing, but I keep saying this, so it might be boring, but I still like it. Okay. So I want to.
You cannot like some things.
An interesting experience I had. I was giving a keynote recently. It's exciting. Young professor giving a keynote. It's cool. Somebody wants to listen to me. So you go there, and I give them this pitch about, hey, AR VR. We've sorted out tracking. It's relatively stable now. It's relatively good. We should really focus on these issues of social legal concerns, privacy, equity, accessibility, security. These are the really difficult topics we need to. And so the questions that I got, I was a little grilled in that conference. It was very interesting. I guess some of my peers wanted to show me who's the. Anyway, so, and they're not peers. They're obviously more advanced than me, like professors and all that. So it was an interesting pre-tenure experience, I guess. Anyway, so I was surprised to get the pushback. It's like, Michael, are you sure that we have solved tracking and sensing? Shouldn't we be spending more time on those. Where I'm saying, yeah, I mean, we have the fundamental, but the next level is to do tracking and sensing in a privacy preserving way. Like I can build the craziest infrastructure and sense the hell out of you, but that is not what I should be doing.
Right.
And there comes this other thing, maybe, I don't know, you triggered. So this project that you mentioned with the daughter deceased, I had a student walk into my office. I lost my brother in 2008. It was a difficult time. So would I want to bring him back in VR, in 360? How would my mom think about this? So I was thinking a lot about this. And I decided with the student, I don't think it's the right project for me to work on emotionally. And that student had a similar past. So we thought we connected well. We decided not to do the project. So now somebody asked us the project. So now I feel like, not like, oh, somebody stole that idea. I feel like maybe I should work on it, maybe to set the right example, because a lot of things went wrong there. And so I feel like I actually missed an opportunity to sacrifice a little bit of my own mental health, maybe, for generating something that maybe might be useful. I might also be wrong with how I think about, but it's like one of those topics that's really close to you. You feel like, I know how to design this right. I feel like I can guide the student. I should have done this. And I was sad. I made it as one of the examples in my MOOC where I was like, yeah, I made the decision not to work on the project. And this is good for those reasons. And this is bad for those reasons.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you have the perspective to look back and ask, what could you have done? What might you do different going forward and perhaps change? Yeah. Well, this is an awesome conversation. You know, we could talk for hours. We do sometimes. I appreciate you coming back on. I'm really looking forward to the MOOC launching in November. We'll be sending out marketing about that to everyone. Do you want to take some questions now? We have a couple in the...
Yes, please. I think we have a lot of patient visitors.
I think we can open up the lines if folks want to. Trevor, was there somebody that wanted to chat? You mind helping us with that?
I'm reading 3 posted questions. I'm reading through them right now.
Is it Jatin, or how do you?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Hi.
Yep, that's Jatin. Hi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, and I hope I'm audible. Like my voice is pretty clear enough, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, amazing session, and I had some of the best insights I've ever had in the immersive tech zone as of now, till now.
Did you pay him?
I did not pay anybody. Nobody's paid.
No.
This is why we do this. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I don't know how many other people are here because I cannot see that. Okay. I am from India. I just
100,000. No.
Yeah.
Hey, it's so cool that you're joining us remotely from India.
So I am from India and I just graduated from my college. So that is university. And I just ended my new job. And I've been working into this domain for the last 2 to 3 years, from my second year or so, or maybe my sophomore. Okay. So I have a lot of experience, not as compared to you, but the main questions that I have is, first of all, it's amazing thing that you just mentioned, that the use of paper has been just limited to just as a marker. Okay. How can we, make it more fruitful? So what do you think are some of the, most vaguely possible ways we can do so?
So I wish Shweta were on here with me. She's the student working with me on this. One of the things we are really excited about is the idea of creating interactive handouts so that we can give a paper-based handout to students, and we build the tools so that instructors are in a position to create those handouts, actually using paper-based techniques, not like a 3D authoring tool that they have to learn first with this barrier to entry. And so we've explored like 6 different examples. There's a lot of interesting around like collaborating around paper. It's very interesting. It's very versatile. You need to think about what's the AR perspective. Is it going to be a headset? Is it going to be a tablet? Is it going to be a smartphone? So we've explored all these. We've actually played with the HoloLens 2. The latest features there. Can we track pens? Can we track hands? How well does this work when you hold a pen? We've looked at iPad with LiDAR, so basically built-in 3D scanner now. Doesn't have a lot of the sense making yet, but I mean, it has a very good read of the geometry of the environment around you. Couldn't distinguish paper from the environment, so the precision isn't good enough. And so I think it's an interesting space to play around with. I just wanted to share this one interactive handout example. It was around physics and explaining how forces work. And Shweta came up with a lot of the examples. And I think it's a place where a lot of people can still play with, because there's this book on the myth of the paperless office, which is true. Like, we use paper a lot. I'm not sure whether you would agree you use a lot of paper in your education right now. See, so then I don't think it's all going to go away with AR, VR. So we need to think about these integrating ecosystems that includes analog devices like paper. Probably you didn't think of paper as an analog device, but it is.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason that this question arises to me is because I'm also working into the domain of education for using AR for education. I'm working in a startup. I just joined. I am sorry, I won't be able to take the name of the startup. Okay. So here I am a research designer. Okay. So my sole aim is to build experiences, which are out of the box. And as of now, the task given to me is to relate this AR VR experiences with the reality. Okay. Whether it may be AR or VR, we are still, interacting with the virtual objects. Okay. But now my task is to, make these virtual objects interact with the reality. Okay. So what do you think are the things possible? Like this one, the paper experience is a good example. I also thought on it, and I was, the simplest experience that I could think of was that there are two, virtual objects. One is a battery and one is a bulb. And the user has to join the connection via a pencil. He draws on the pencil, on the paper using a pencil. And once the connection is made, the light bulb, turns on. Okay. This was one of the things. Another thing that I, tried to build was a blow AR experience. That was for, giving the user the understanding of the forces. So basically in that experience, you will spawn a boat in an ocean, which is virtual, and you would have to blow on the screen of your smartphone. And depending on the force of your blow, the boat will move ahead with that force.
That's cool. And you're just doing it based on the microphone?
Microphone, exactly. I took the microphone readings, did some, clamping and stuff like that, remapped it, and then added local force to in Unity. Okay, so that's done. So what other things are there? What other things come to your mind? How can it be in reality?
So first of all, I think I'm talking to somebody who's really creative and explorative, and probably still. I can't see you, so a young maybe student, but has all this really powerful energy. You sound like really amazing person to work with, so that's cool. I do think that like what you're actually asking is, it wouldn't be helpful if I brainstorm 6 examples with you now, which we could probably come up with, but you should think about your method. What is your method to explore that design space of interactions? And I think we often look at example papers. I'm not sure, are we talking about academic research, or are we talking about it from a brainstorming perspective, from an interaction design perspective? I think you want to set yourselves a few constraints for how you think through this design space, and you're bringing in the microphone, the phone. You have all these sensing things, so you've designed a very big space, and then paper is also in there. Like it's an endless design space. Maybe techniques. And so I think it's a methods. What you're actually asking is like, what's the right method? Not what are 5 other examples. I think if I give you the right method, which I can't come up with that on the spot right now, but I think method, really approaching this systematically. So I have a lecture in my MOOC on brainstorming and ideation and problem framing. And I think right now what I hear is like so much creative energy, but it needs to be channeled in an interesting way. And often, I don't know what you are most interested in, I think is the right way to channel it, but then think about as few different variables you want to play with, maybe maximum of 3, if that helps you thinking about this abstractly, and then thinking through all the different combinations. That's what I would advise you to do. And you may not be happy with that answer, but it sounds like smart, no?
Yeah, it does. And I don't know if I'm asking many questions. One last question that I would like to ask is, where can I, read more about the things that you guys are doing? Are you, presenting them? Are there research papers about it? Are there any videos about it? I would be happy to, go through them if that's possible.
Yeah, so I mean, you can find some of us online. Jeremy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, your work, I mean, you could give out your lab website. We've got a website for the XR initiative where we point to some of these other locations. We started a podcast. Obviously, this is one of the live recordings, but we've recorded, 25 or so episodes. We're launching one a week. So that's a place to learn more about what's
But
happening
it's
here.
cool. It's cool that our first person is remote and feels so close at the same time. So
Yeah.
Jatin, I wanted to thank you for your questions and keep up this interest. I think this is going to be very innovative.
Thank you. You're welcome. I do run a community myself as well, because when 3 years ago I started out stuff, I was finding people, but I was not able to connect with them. So I ended up starting my own community with 4 people only, and now we are like 7,000 plus people strong on LinkedIn.
Wow.
And so that is what we are doing. And I would love to know how can we as a community maybe can play a part in it or whatever.
Sure.
I'm really excited about the stuff you guys are doing, and I'm really amazed.
Well, we'd love for you to share the MOOC when it comes out. I think that audience could be very interested in that.
At least, thank you so much. No more questions from my side.
No.
I'm sorry for asking so many questions.
No. It's great. I appreciate that.
And maybe we can even follow up at some stage.
We can follow up. I see there was a question from Jake. I think he had to jump off probably. Has there been greater interest in XR across the university, particularly from the faculty, now that remote learning is the norm, at least for a while?
I find it very interesting when people ask those questions. Like, is there a way to say no to that one?
I mean, the interest is there, right? Like, I think it's just a little.
Is it a revenue-driven question?
Yeah.
Jake, you're doing right. You're working in the right space.
Yes.
It's a lot of interest. The challenges are still very real. It didn't get easier. It actually made a lot of things harder. So what do you think?
I agree. I mean, the equity in the devices, the platforms. I mean, there's a lot of innovation going on with these collaborative, VR or, things like spatial where you can connect in AR or VR and have a more 3D, Zoom meeting. I think that will evolve, right? That will happen. There will be more presence-based collaborative meetings like this, where I think there's a lot of Zoom, but a lot of, it's still 2D and you still have things going on.
So I think it's relatively easy to do something XR in a class. There's a lot of us experimenting with just bringing in something XR into our classrooms. There's a big difference in designing meaningful AR VR experiences tailored to learning goals. And that's why I think it needs that infrastructure that you have. It's so smart to put you inside academic innovation, to have an access to faculty that work directly in educational research and that we experience these challenges every day. Like one thing I'm thinking about is how could we. So we're doing a conference next year, and every time somebody organizes a conference, they always want to kind of like add one new thing, push us to the next thing.
Thanks, Steve Jobs.
Yeah. So previously it's been, you couldn't really innovate because obviously you had to deal with COVID-19. It was like last minute change. We understand. But I think the expectations for next year's conferences are like really high. Like those that we just have to assume it's going to be mostly virtual. So how are we going to innovate? How are we going to make it an interesting experience for the people to attend? And beyond Zoom, I'm hoping is a powerful platform. But it's,
I was talking with a faculty in School of Music today that's attending a conference, and he said they're doing the receptions in Altspace. He's like, could I borrow a VR headset so I can participate in those? So they're trying out the networking receptions in, a virtual collaborative platform. I'll be curious to see how it goes, right? But we did a quick training session on how the device and how to use it, and I'll be available to help. But that doesn't scale, right? I can't provide one-on-one support for thousands of people.
It's difficult, and the theme of our conversation has been around scale.
Mm-hmm.
How do we measure success? I think is what I hear a little bit when I listen to ourselves.
Yeah.
Ruchita, who has been a student actually, I still remember you, asked us, and I'm gonna take the question, but you're gonna take the answer. What are the most pressuring ethical issues in AR/VR today? What do you think?
I mean, there's a whole space around data privacy. Can be done with this data. I mean, I think the number I've heard is in a 20-minute VR experience, you generate 2 million data points on average. What can I collect? What the transparency into that information? Who's housing it? You know, the company that owns Oculus is Facebook. You know, they have, you know, not always been transparent with what they're doing with the data. And so I think having, you know, providing easier ways for users or people to see what's happening with your data, being able to opt in or opt out of sharing, I think creating, I think the GDPR went a long way to begin to make a change here, because there haven't been policies at the federal level in the United States to do anything about that. I think that for sure around the data privacy and security. And then as we get into that, you know, trauma or what types of experiences you can create. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about that, if you've done much work. I mean, Jeremy Balinson out of Stanford's done a lot of work around how your brain interprets these VR experiences. And, you know, his message is like, don't do bad things in VR that you wouldn't do in real life, because your brain doesn't always know the difference.
Yeah. Any effort that tries to provide frameworks for us to think through this space, like just one of the issues you just saw with an earlier question was like, the space is so complex. How do you think through it? How do you know that you've sufficiently thought through it? And I think understanding that designers and developers have a responsibility. You're not just coding. Right. Your responsibility is not to get the most data out of the users, to fingerprint anything and everything that you can then sell. That's not your responsibility. You should be happy with what you're creating in this space. Sometimes it can be experimental. I'm not against, when it's clearly defined as such, any kind of deception in user studies. I think there are good reasons for it sometimes, but I actually think one of the best ways to approach this whole space is the universities have been establishing these IRB, these institutional review boards that are looking at research, and anything that involves human subjects potentially creates data. And AR/VR is all that. I feel like everything we do in AR/VR is human subjects research. And there need to be these processes in place. It's not good enough. This idea, don't do to others. What is it called? Don't do to others what you don't
want done to you. That's very subjective, right?
Yeah, I think some of us don't care.
Right.
So it's not the right ethical framework.
Right.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have so much crime in the world. So and we need more. See, one of the big issues is we don't have a lot of good, well-articulated frameworks to think through this. And I think what you're calling a standard might be one of those examples. The problem is adoption later.
I mean, you touched on it briefly, and it recrystallized to me in the Facebook Connect presentation a couple weeks ago is the work they're doing around their AR glasses and sensing the world. But like, what? You're wearing a device on your head that's sensing everything and potentially recording the world, and they were like,
I'm aware.
You've got to turn it off when it goes into the bathroom. Well, how do you know you're in a bathroom? Like what? Like you want it scanning and sensing and recording. There are just areas to address.
Right? When I work with these technologies, there's two Michaels working with these technologies. One is Michael the researcher, and one is Michael the private being. And as a researcher, I'm okay to take more risk, but I approach this with this IRB perspective. Like I don't want to get the data at every cost. Like I want to make it the risk should really be in line with the benefit to the user. Their risk should be minimal. I think that and risk is like really seeing these risks is, I think, is like a lot of managers are like, just don't understand, don't appreciate that there are a lot of risks to it. Again, this project that I worked on with Shweta was really interesting. We asked about whether people would use a HoloLens in their home, participate in an educational scenario where all they do is work on paper, but they wear a HoloLens all the time.
Sure.
And we generated meshes from their environments, and we showed the users those meshes, and it was very interesting. There's like, okay, you can't see anything. The resolution is so bad of these 3D reconstructions. I don't care. And so then you ask them, but what if I showed the whole video feed to people? And then like, oh no, that's maybe I wouldn't want that. And so then I'm thinking, okay, the problem right here is that you do not understand that I showed you could actually extract data that collected and I can your home, like the key to your door. And that is alarming, but I think not a lot of people make those connections yet. They're thinking there's the cynical person thinking about AR VR is not mature enough, it's not going to go anywhere, blah blah blah, and that's when you see those examples. But if it's potentially very powerful or dangerous. So
well, then you begin to add AI and machine learning on top of that, and now begin to predict and make assumptions about, especially in learning, right? Oh, you're not getting this challenge in VR yet. You're going to fail, right? Everyone else that's done it has failed, and so then that gets into the whole algorithms and that another conversation. We can have another episode about that. There's another message here from Khalif, I think. I'm a mechanical engineering student, junior at the university, and I've been looking into building my own AR platform. How do you feel the current AR VR platforms hinder people from accessing them?
From accessing
the platforms
the platforms?
Yeah, creating content, I would assume. Unless, Khalif, are you still here? Do you want to? Oh, I think
we're running low. We're running low on participants.
That's okay.
Still have more than 10. That's good. So it's not just you and me, but we can keep going. There are a lot of challenges actually there. So maybe, so it's hard to structure the answer. I've been looking into building my own AR platform. I think that is I wonder. So that is an interesting direction, right? If you're not happy with what the people do, should you be building your own platform? I'm thinking that's a scenario where I'm thinking, we need to give some credit to some of the things they are doing, because on the technology side, it's not like Facebook doesn't understand what the technology can do. They're just really taking that risk sometimes. There's also this constant probing and testing. How far would people go with sharing their personal lives on Facebook? People process all kinds of things on Facebook.
Very
success
far.
And failure, life and death, and it's been very interesting, this whole transformation of the social media space. And like, let's just side with them for a second. It is potentially fascinating to learn how far people would go, because we can potentially offer you these advanced services. And we need to tell you is like the trade-offs you need to make, because you need to be able to understand that when you get these advanced services, I have access to this data, and then there needs to be a contract where you agree what happens with that data. And I think, and I'm not even sure whether I get this right from a lawyer perspective, but I feel like that I understand that they're trying to push things. And I also think that's a way to do innovation, but not at all costs. And this informed consent is a very important.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I answered the question directly, but I feel like maybe you want to cover some of the others as well. I don't see the questions anymore. Oh, I do. Okay.
Yep, I think we've answered all of one. There's a silly one from Eric. Is XR the silver bullet to all the world's problems? No.
Okay, I agree with you. Next one. Thanks, Eric.
Yes, keeping it light. Yeah, I think, the question about build or buy is important. Like what I would say in that, what problems are you trying to solve? What issues are you trying to address with building a new platform, and where do you want to take it? If you're trying to solve
It is interesting.
Yeah.
Do you remember Diaspora? like this idea of creating a social network that is distributed physically. All the nodes are distributed. Nobody owns the actual data, and
Maybe.
like isn't Bitcoin in some ways set up the same way? I don't actually know exactly. I don't understand all this, but
blockchain, yeah.
Blockchain, right? Blockchain. But it doesn't gain the traction that you would think it should. Like people still commit to Facebook, and maybe, I mean, it becomes also like, why do people vote the way they vote? So
Sure.
we need to. A lot of the issues are, I think, a lot of the issues start with us in education. That VR shouldn't be this thing that's only done in a few places. No, it's there. It's right here. You need to build it into every curriculum. A kindergarten kid needs to know what their smartphone can do. Can't just buy you one when you're 7 and then when you're 18 you learn about what you actually did for the last. So this education needs to happen very early. So that means that our instructors need to feel more comfortable with these technologies. There are a lot of looking at that very exotic as they device, and so we need that's the thing that's the role that we can play. And that would add to the ubiquitous question from Christian here. How ubiquitous do you think XR technology will be to the average person in 10 years? He's referring to the specific hyper reality video that creates dystopian, maybe not bad vision of the future.
That video was quite dystopian when you got hacked. Not enough people want to put something on their face, right? There's all these rumors of Apple building these glasses that can create there's still fixed problems to deal with, right? Heat and computer
optics as well.
Yeah, optic. Like there's physics problems that need to be dealt with. There's been people talking on contact lenses that put a computer on your eyeball, right? Like that's even closer.
Yeah. So when people say XR, like the question is, what do they actually mean? Because like there's this argument to be made around smartphone-based AR and how ubiquitous it is already. Like, I mean, we're talking about several hundred millions of users that could have it right now. Do they use it? I don't know. Do they see the value in it? Well, maybe we don't have the right content yet. And how much more users will be in 10 years? Well, in terms of numbers, like maybe we have more people with headsets and maybe over a few more people, but many people have a smartphone in the world where we don't have that. And I haven't checked the latest numbers, but I still feel like it's relatively pervasive. A lot of people have some of these latest generation smartphones. And you could argue that, I mean, the penetration, I'm not sure what the right words are in this marketing world, is there. People have access to AR already. Getting access to VR is more difficult.
Yeah. There's a question about AR and VR have a place with home assistance and IoT. I think so. I mean, there's a group I talk to, they talk about ambient computing, and they take it a step further of how AR and VR plus IoT devices and all these sensors kind of around you are all working together to create a digitally enhanced space, right? I mean, Elon's building a brain link interface, right, to plug you into the matrix. I mean, they're starting with biggies, I mean, they're starting with people that have physical disabilities, right? But it's not hard to see where you take it from there.
Yeah, the pitch is good right now, but is it potentially a weapon?
Right.
So,
last question, maybe. What do you think web AR will replace application-based AR?
I'm a very strong believer in web XR, but I do not think it will replace so the question is like the native mobile-based AR versus running AR through a web browser. If you ask yourself seriously how many web apps you use on an everyday basis and how many actual apps you're using and how often do you do online banking on your phone through a website, and how often, if you do online banking on your phone, how often do you use an app? There's this certain threshold that everybody has. It's like, oh, no, for this, I need to use a real app. Like, also think of the seriousness of the task. Like, if you're booking a trip, do you do that on your phone? Or do you go to a powerful computer where you can see the bathrooms of the hotels that you're like? So my answer is while I'd like to think that the web XR role will increase over the next few years due to distribution, it's actually really easy to distribute content this way. I don't think it will replace the AR or VR app markets that we have, but they need to work more together. These app stores, I hate those silos, those islands. I understand marketing, I get it. Apple wants to own this, and Facebook wants to own it, and Google wants to own it. But it's like, come on, guys. Are we building a better world together, or what are we doing here? And I think we could be building a better world together.
Thank you so much for spending time today, giving your thoughts, Michael, and talking about your MOOC and helping shape the XR initiative. Thank you all, to all of our guests and attendees and questions. It was a great discussion. I really appreciate it. We'll be having another event October 29th in a virtual platform called Verbella. So look for messages coming out about that for our XR speaker series this fall. Should be interesting with Michelle Abersold in nursing, talking about her getting under the skin VR simulation. And we'll be doing it in a bit more immersive, even though it's on a application on your computer.
I mean, I could be more immersive.
Yes. You can't get past this wall here on my screen. Well, thank you so much. It was great talking with you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.